If you are a New York Rangers fan, or just an NHL prospects fan in general, then this video's content might actually not be all too surprising. But my golly gee, am I not lying when I go out there and say that this surprised me? Because today we are going over some very interesting New York Rangers discourse that has to be acknowledged post-Artemi Panarin trade. And it doesn't actually revolve around Artemi Panarin. No. It revolves around the prospects. So, long story short, Artemi Panarin was traded from New York over to LA. We know this, it happened a few days ago. He's on pace for 86 points this year, but he was sent over for a third, a fourth, and prospect Liam Greentree. Now, say what you want about Liam Greentree. Is he an absolute bona fide, franchise-altering, top elite-level guy? No, he's not that. But he was the main piece in the Artemi Panarin deal. Which is why, of course, when it comes to Liam Greentree, there are going to be folks that will forever link him to Artemi Panarin, and in a way, this guy's career might have been damned because he got traded for one of the best players in the league as the main piece. With that said, this is what Ken Campbell wrote about in the Hockey News. Regardless of what Liam Greentree does with his career in New York, it's a name fans will almost certainly remember for a long time. And for the most part, it's a good article. He talks about Liam Greentree. He talks about what this guy could be. Hey, New York Rangers fans, here's your future. That's the entire thesis of the piece. But then Cam follows it up by saying this. It's my latest article for the Hockey News. I wanted to talk to Liam Greentree Friday night about the Artemi Panarin trade. But the New York Rangers sent a message to the Windsor Spitfires after the deal, forbidding him to say anything about it. Seriously. And they wonder why they're in third last place. Now, I don't necessarily want to conclude anything about their position in the standings and how they seem to bubble wrap these prospects, but this is a really interesting note. That Liam Greentree, the guy, was immediately told by the New York Rangers via the Windsor Spitfires, hey, don't talk about that trade. You just got traded to New York, you're not allowed to talk about it. Sorry, buddy. And this opens up a pretty interesting conversation, too, because Scott Wheeler went out there and said this. I know that NHL fans hate hearing reporters complain about access, but having worked with all 32 NHL teams on features on their young prospects, I can say that the New York Rangers are the only organization that is this controlling of their young guys. Of course, he's responding to the Ken Campbell discourse. He's giving his own take on it. Apparently, the Rangers are controlling of their prospects. What exactly does he mean? For context, both Wheeler, Brett Berard, and Providence heard from the Rangers a few years ago when the Friar set up a phone call with Wheeler and Brett for this profile, which amounted to a flowery feature. Essentially saying here that when Scott Wheeler interviewed Brett Berard, the Providence college team, Berard, and Wheeler all got angry messages from the New York Rangers afterwards. Throughout Gabe Perreault's time at Boston College, the Rangers didn't want Scott Wheeler and colleagues talking to him for stories, even if we were traveling to Boston. Basically, the only place you can tell the stories of the brightest young stars is at IIHF events, where everyone has to talk. For reference, other organizations invite coverage and are eager not just to make arrangements with their prospects, but also their staff. The Penguins, Bruins, Wild, and others would give me their development people on a call tomorrow if I was working on something on one of their kids. The Rangers? Nah. They don't do that. And furthermore, this was a comment made by Sleepy Skila. Were they also like this with Lafreniere and Kakko and others back then? Or is this maybe a byproduct of them trying things differently after a few rough outcomes from their top-end young talent? Scott Wheeler then says Lafreniere was the most bubble-wrapped prospect I've covered. Night and day from Bedard, for example, whose team reps almost always said yes. And I think it impacted Lafreniere's maturity and readiness for New York. But with Laf, it did start before the Rangers too. His representation controlled requests to Rimouski, like pulling teeth just to be told he couldn't talk that day. Multiple requests, follow-ups, etc., just to no avail. I and others, including league media, couldn't get to Lafreniere in person, on the road, etc. And with that said, I think this is a pretty illuminating thought about what exactly it is with the New York Rangers that seems to be so problematic in the way they handle their prospects and the prospects' media relationship. They are straight up telling teams, hey, we got a prospect in your system. Don't allow that prospect to talk about the trade. The big trade that we just made, which involved our Temi Panarin. Liam, you're not allowed to talk about it, buddy. Same thing could be said about some of these other players throughout the years. Brett Berard, team doesn't want him to talk to the media. Gabe Perreault, they didn't want media talking to him either, even though they were going to Boston to have those conversations. Very different from other NHL organizations. And then you have that Lafreniere comment, which I do think is the biggest thing here as well. Lafreniere, the most bubble-wrapped prospect Wheeler has had to cover here, night and day from Connor Bedard. And potentially it impacted Lafreniere's maturity and readiness for New York. Take a look at this. Balanced New York Rangers fan said, I can't help but wonder if Lafreniere would be a better skater if he had spent more time helping Scott with at least a few interview pieces. Damn, what could have been? Idiotic and butthurt comment by Scott. I don't hate him for bringing this tendency of the Rangers to light, but it is disingenuous to imply that Laf's lack of media availability as a kid somehow hindered his development. And I'm not necessarily going to disagree with that. I do think that bubble wrapping prospects is not generally a good thing. If it's not even just Lafreniere as a member of the Rangers, but Lafreniere and his representation as well, I'm thinking hey, Emily Castonguay, what was going on with this dude? What were you allowing and not allowing this guy to do in the media? Lafreniere, of course, one of the more polarizing first overall picks of the last few years, a guy who was supposed to be the next best thing. But this year he is on pace for only 46 points in 82 games. That's not bad, it's just, the guy was supposed to be a generational okay, we're not going to use that label on him. Sorry. He was supposed to be an 80, 90-point guy, and now he's 24. He'll be 25 at the start of next season. Is that the year where Lafreniere starts to become a 70-point guy? Just tossing a number out there? Is that the timeline here? I'm not too sure. I'm not going to necessarily agree or disagree with Wheeler when he says that Lafreniere's maturity and readiness was held back because the New York Rangers didn't want the guy to do interviews all too often, but I do think it's worth noting that this is how they treat their players. And over the past 10 years, this has been an issue that first-round guys from New York just don't pan out. And it started a long time ago. Brady Shea, 2012. Okay, say what you want about him, but not really all too great. JT Miller, 2011. He had a good career in Vancouver, but there are a lot of other things that you can say about that dude. The Rangers didn't have a first-round pick until 2017, when they took Lias Andersson, who fizzled away as an NHL prospect. Filip Chytil is actually fine, but the guy is never healthy. Then the next year you had Vitaly Kravtsov, who also didn't really do anything. K'Andre Miller was good, but he is no longer with the organization, as is Niels Lundqvist. Capo Kakko was first round 2019, Alexis Lafreniere 2020, Brennan Othman 2021. Gabe Perreault's doing some pretty good work now, I guess, but this has been an issue for New York over the past decade, and hearing now that one of these elements on how they treat their prospects is the fact that they are so sheltered from the media, I do think that is worth bringing up. So you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below whether or not that actually is a meaningful conversation to have. Do you agree with this assessment by Scott Wheeler? Do you think that Lafreniere was really stunted because of this media relationship? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sign on. And bye.